Alright, this is going to be one serious video. I've done like 6 hours today of reading. I've done more hours yesterday and more hours the previous day trying to piece together what the hell is going on with Steward Health and MPT and all of these hospital operators and providers. I wanted to try to get to the bottom of it, and I'm going to try my hardest not to slander anyone. I'm not going to mention many names, maybe just like one or two, because honestly, I don't want to be the cause of somebody's name being, darkened because of my lack of research. So I want to start from as far back in the beginning as I can, from when articles start arising about Steward Health and some allegations that may or may not hold water. I just want to disclaim right now that everything that is written about these hospital operators and their landlords can be viewed from a faceted lens. Like, it can be viewed from different perspectives. You could say, all right, that was just a bad deal, or you could say that was definitely wrongdoing or fraud. So I'm going to leave their interpretation to you. I'm not going to call anyone a fraud here, but I'm going to lay some facts about what has been written, and I'm going to try to cross-check it with what is out there that I can find on the internet, that I can try to figure out how much water it holds and how much validity it has, and how strong the connection is between other articles and some real world events. So with all that said, look at how many tabs I have for you. Like, look at up there. I'm gonna go through a ton of tabs, and I'm gonna just share some stories and see if I can try to unravel as much truth as I can about the situation. My personal motivation is initially because I'm a large stockholder of MPW, ticker symbol MPW, which is Medical Properties Trust. And so I really wanted to do some due diligence and research. By the way, this is my due diligence and research, not yours, although I'm doing a lot of research now, so I feel like I should be sharing it with all of you. Anyway, I don't want to blabber too much. Again, this is not investment advice. Nothing I say here is investment advice. You should make your own decisions. Blah 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 blah. Okay. Everything you do in the stock markets can result in losses, etc. So, all right, the story begins now. This is my agenda here. I'm going to refer to it from time to time just so I can keep myself on track. But the story really starts to happen in 2013, which is 10 years after the formation of MPW. This video is going to be more focused on Steward Healthcare, not so much on MPW, but they're interlinked and intertwined in many ways that you'll see as I go through it. So in 2013, the first article that I can find is just a kind of a non-event. All right, it says former Steward CEO indicted in Florida on charges of obstructing investigation into this former employer. So basically, this is not so much to say that they were obstructing, financial access to financial information for Steward, but the employer before that. And Steward just hired them as a experienced, manager, but ended up obviously being a bad hire, and the employer was released soon after, or it says they left for whatever personal reasons indefinitely, basically fired, released, whatever. And so nothing too much there. It could be just a simple negligence or a mistake in hiring, but it starts to kind of lay the foundation of these like repeated mistakes that are of dubious and questionable matter, quality. So next we go into articles that are basically inspired by a lot of Viceroy research. I don't know if you guys have heard them. They were being sued by MPW or MPT for defamation of character, and running a short sellers scheme. So again, multiple perspectives on the story. Obviously, that's not what Viceroy would say, but Viceroy released, a bunch of documents. Let me see if I can find one or two of them, where, like this one, for example, they're doing case study on Steward International. That's one of the companies that was in charge. This is February 14th, 2023 is when they formed this document, but the Maltese debacle happened a little bit earlier, which leads me straight into it. All right, so next on the chopping block is, this is from Malta Today. The article was written, I believe, in, all right, I don't have the date here, which is bad. But obviously it's a newer article because, ongoing since May 2020. I swear I saw the date somewhere. But nevertheless, it's an article about the opaque ownership structure of Steward International that was behind basically the purchase from a government, I believe, of hospital operations in Malta. Malta is a small island country in the Mediterranean Sea. And apparently there was a lot of corruption, a lot of kickbacks involved in the whole situation, and the whole purchase was funded through a very opaque, quote unquote, structure of business names, of business holdings. And at the end of the story, basically, this is kind of a picture of the holdings. I'll explain it in a little bit. But the story, if you want to read all of these, by the way, I'll leave a link to all of the articles. I highly encourage everybody to go and read the articles themselves to try to draw their own conclusions. They definitely read like a very entertaining story, and they seem kind of biased on the short seller side. Okay, that's to be expected, right? Because that's the entire point of the articles. But I actually don't know, who wrote these articles. Are they just quoting Viceroy research, or what the motivation is? They do read like a really well written like criminal book, and I don't know as how much of the story is actually true. But what I do know is what I have cross checked, which appears to be true. Like the factual numbers and the purchases and events are true, because I would look at things like the 10Qs and I can kind of match the amounts that actually when it comes to Steward ownership in the forms of loans and investments, and Steward equity investment from the MPW Q10, which is a quarterly report. The numbers actually check out, and the purchases, the history of all that actually checks out. So it leads me to believe that those facts at least are true. But what I don't know is, the perspective on it. Was it just like a bad deal? Was it like sometimes there's gaps in dates that says, okay, well, this property was valued at $500 million in 2012, and it was purchased for $1.2 billion. So I don't know. Okay, so when is that purchase happening? Is it right after it was valued at that price, or some years later after inflation and housing or commercial real estate appreciations? So there are gaps in the stories. So I just want to mention that. But I want to go right into these structures that seem very, very like suspicious. These purchases of the hospitals for really, really blown up prices. So the idea here is a repeated pattern by Medical Properties Trust, where they buy inflated priced hospitals. Now, why would they do that? I mean, it's not in their best interest, right? What they'll do is they'll do buy leasebacks. So they'll buy the hospital and they'll lease it back to the business, the operator of the hospital. And sometimes they straddle them with impossible rents. Like, for example, one of the very prominent outlined deals is that they bought a bunch of hospitals from Steward, the buildings, for $1.2 billion, and they were extracting, like over 100 million, I think 120 or 141 or something like that $1 million per year for rent. Now, that's quite a bit. I mean, if you own a house, that mortgages, require a lot less than that. I mean, that's more than 1/10 of the entire price of a hospital per year. Like, if you had to pay that, let's say you're a rich dude or a girl or whatever, and you buy $1 million house, how hard would it be if you had to pay 100 grand, over 100? So like, let's say 110 grand per year in rent, not even mortgage, right? In just rent. So that's kind of like a way for Medical Properties Trust to inflate the value of their holdings by strangling the hospital operators with enormous amounts of rent because their leadership, in this case Steward, is okay with paying that much rent because they get to sell the hospitals for very high amounts and allegedly extract very hefty dividends, over $100 million worth of dividends as a result of these sales, as well as previous owners like I don't know how to pronounce this, but Cerberus Capital, which also did the same thing. They extracted like a $500 million dividend after the sale of the Steward buildings to MPW through a stock ownership scheme of some sort. So that's kind of like the where they're coming from. And here's a little bit of a clapback because I had to go all the way to basically court filings in order to find out, okay, what is the structure that they were using in Malta and why is it so devious? And here's what it says. First, I'm going to read it to you. It's going to be kind of boring, and then kind of summarize it in my own words to try to simplify it in my own head anyways. I had to read it a couple times. I don't know what your IQ is, but it takes me a while to understand these things. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to try to interpret it. So MPT has gone to pains in its court filings to explain the corporate structures behind the different stewards. So Stewards has a bunch of different entities, and here's the explanation here. According to the filings in 2020, MPT and members of Steward's management, when they say Steward management, it basically means the one person I'm going to probably name in this video, which is Ralph de la Torre, who's the CEO, this guy right here, who's the CEO, de la Torre, who's the CEO of Steward. And he's the one that owns by himself. When they say management, they just mean him, basically. I don't know if there are other management personnel involved, but he's kind of like the main guy. And he owns a lot of these entities just by himself, in partnership sometimes with MPW or MPT, and sometimes not. So anyways, reading on, according to the filings in 2020, MPT and members of Steward's management, including Steward CEO Ralph de la Torre, formed a joint venture named Manolete Health LLC to develop international opportunities. MPT holds 49% of Manolete Health LLC, and the members of Steward's management, meaning de la Torre, who formed the business, hold the other 51%, so they have controlling stake, through an investment vehicle that also has Manolete in its name. MPT, so they basically formed a group, and that group purchased 51% of this Manolete Health entity. MPT explained that Steward itself has no interest in the joint venture, which is solely between MPT and the individuals of Steward management who formed the investment vehicle. MPT says it had given $205 million loan to Manolete Health LLC, secured by Steward's management's equity in Steward to fund the new venture. So this is pretty interesting, right? So MPT funds this new venture with $205 million, which is secured by Steward's management's equity in Steward itself. So Torre's stake in Steward is the one backing basically this loan, which I think is pretty interesting, and that's probably how they ended up with a little bit of Steward stock on their balance sheet. So I'm going to refer to this pretty often, and this is Steward's equity investment. I'm sorry, MPT. When I say MPT, Medical Property Trust, investment in Steward equity, which is currently valued at $125 million. But to continue now. Monolith Health LLC, according to MPT, used that $205 million in part to purchase the rights and existing assets related to all present and future international opportunities previously owned by Steward, as well as 4 hospitals in Colombia. All right, so now we're purchasing hospitals in Colombia, okay? So here's what that means, okay? What I interpret it as is they used the $205 million to buy. So basically, this entity is de la Torres. So de la Torres uses this money from MPT to buy existing interests from his own company that he has huge amounts of stock in. All right, so it's basically like borrowing money, and is using Steward stock as collateral to purchase parts of Steward. You get that? It's really it's really convoluted, but it's basically, you know, borrowing money to rob, not rob, but, you know, to take apart the company that he has interest in. He has a lot of stock in. Maybe he wants to buy the profitable parts, knowing that his ownership of Steward is going to be degrading over time, because the company is going to be going down. I don't know. It seemed like Steward House survived for quite a long time afterwards, but nevertheless, it seems like a really shady move. All right, from my standpoint here, according to these court filings. All right, moving on. Monolith Health LLC MPT says in its court filing, also made an unsecured loan of $1.1 million to an entity controlled by Steward's management. Okay, so this Monolith Health, this structure that we talked about just now, that's purchasing international rights and interests from Steward, is is given a loan to another entity that's solely owned by De La Torre, okay, of 1.1 million euro, which is not that much, all right, considering the numbers we're talking about, and in which MPT says neither it nor Monolith Health LLC holds an interest in, to facilitate the purchase by this entity of Steward Healthcare International. So this is going to be important, okay? So this loan is going to help facilitate the purchase of this entity, Steward Healthcare International, which is basically like a shell company based in Britain, for the purpose of purchasing these Maltese properties. So you can see how they're really obscuring. Like, why wouldn't Steward buy it? You know what I mean? They have to create the structure of a trust that has majority interest of another trust that's partnered with MPT, that then extends a loan, okay, to facilitate in part the purchase, well, I don't know if in part, it might be the whole purchase, of an entity that's somewhere based in Britain. So SHCI in turn owned hospital concessions in Malta before they were rescinded by Maltese courts. So this is the entity that owned the Maltese properties. So that's the De La Torre entity. But then the Maltese basically kicked them out. Now, there's a lot that goes on here, which I'm not really going to talk about too much, but there's Wikipedia pages of all the people involved, and it's not looking pretty. Some people are listed in the US as being involved in corruption, and they're basically banned from the US. All right, so some of Maltese government officials, including their, I think, like finance guy, I don't know, Minister of Finance, whatever. And even the Prime Minister, I believe, of the Maltese government is on the crap list of the US at the moment. So it's a big deal. And this goes even further, okay? You won't believe it, but in one of these articles, it talks about, you know, this reporter called Daphne, who was actually murdered because she was looking into the corruption scandals and posting basically daily about it. I forget in which articles, but I'll link all of them below, and you can take a look. And so this reporter gets murdered basically. And so it goes pretty deep. It goes pretty deep. Now, furthermore, let's take a look what's next on the chopping block. So that's the Malta fiasco, all right? It ends with corruption scandals. It ends with banned, politicians from the US, dead reporters, and basically the kicking out of this shell company and their interest in Maltese hospitals from Malta eventually. So that's kind of a crazy story there. Okay, we already covered the MPT clapback, And then in 2019, so a few quiet years, well, not so quiet. In these years, MPW basically continues to do what they do and buys overpriced properties, allegedly. We don't know really the market value of these properties are because it's such a niche market. Like, there's only a few people that own medical properties in the US, right? And MPW basically is the only game in town, or private equity. And we can't really raid private equity books. It's private. So we can't tell what's in there. The only thing we know, the only public company that we can really raid for information is MPW or MPT. And that's why, I have the 10Q open at all times here to try to refer some data to. And also I listen to the quarterly reports and earnings calls, and I'm really curious what's going to happen in February when they have their next report. Because as I stated in the previous video, they're extending yet another loan to Steward, which I think is just throwing dead money, good money after bad. And I'm just wondering why they're doing that. So I'm really curious. And they have like another $215 million write down or something like that related to, loans extended to Steward. Okay. Further, in 2019, the Watsonville debacle. All right. So the $20 million deal. Okay. So this is a funny one here. Apparently, this hospital was purchased by, I believe, Cerberus Capital again, for a certain amount. No. I'm sorry. It was an individual. Okay, it was purchased by an individual. Where's the article here? I think this is the one that's mentioned as the article. A lot of these articles, by the way, are from prospect.org. I think it's like, what was it called? American Prospect. I cross-checked them for how reliable they are. Oh, I'm going to mention that in a little bit. You have a laugh over that for sure. So the American Prospect. American Prospect is kind of like a left-leaning publication, so I wanted to cross-check to see how valid, some of these articles tend to be, so how much like BS I can expect. And so according to this site, this rating site anyways, it has a strong left-leaning bias, and the reliability is mixed. So it's a reliability of 31. Anything under 24 is bad, but anything over 40 is good. So anything in the middle is kind of mixed, like some bad, some good. But it says here that the rating can be affected by heavy bias. So it could potentially be mostly reliable. So these articles that I'm reading from the American Prospect are probably leaning on the more reliable than not article. But it doesn't mean they can't have a perspective and a flavor of their own. Again, I'm going to link, the articles in the comments. So feel free to check them out yourself. There's plenty of write-up about Cerberus and their dealings, and then, their shady involvement with Steward. Allegedly shady. So what happened is in this debacle, right, is basically, I'll just tell you the story because the article is really long. Basically, Cerberus, buys a hospital for around 15 million or something, and then, or actually more, like 30 million. The prices fluctuate basically on every other article. It's unclear how much they bought it for. But then they turn right around and they sell it to an individual, and that individual basically turns around and sells it almost next day, the hospital, the building, to MPW or MPT for 20 million more. Right? So how come Medical Property Trust couldn't just get the original price? Why did they have to go through this guy and line his pocket with $20 million? And now where does this $20 million go? Allegedly somebody was overheard talking in a bar somewhere in Los Angeles about how they made a $20 million off of a hospital deal. But as per usual, according to the article, the hospital was run into the ground. As much money as possible has been extracted, and then the hospital eventually ended up shutting down because it was so burdened with a $5 million basically rent check per year. And as we discussed, these kinds of buy and leaseback deals, the owners are happy to do it because they get that huge sale price on the hospital, and they don't care really what happens after that. They pay themselves that dividend, right? And it doesn't matter if the hospital goes bankrupt because they already got their cut. So they'll agree to any number, any rent that MPW or MPT puts out there. And they just say, okay, 5 million, right? On a property that's not even worth 55 million, right? So not even an 11th of the price of the property. The property is supposedly worth around 30. So imagine paying rent, not even mortgage, rent that's worth 1/6 of your property. You buy, a house for $600,000, and you you rent a house that's worth $600,000, and you pay $100,000 in rent per month. Like that's highway robbery, right? That sounds unreal. So, but it's a way, to inflate numbers, and I guess everybody wins in the short run when it comes to that. Next, so that's Watsonville, 2019. 2 weeks later, Big Springs, Texas, bought a building. MPW bought a building for 27 million. That's worth around. Let me check, right, because it's being cut off a little bit. It's worth around 11.7 million. So they basically pay more than double the price for a building that's valued a certain number, and basically the same modus operandi afterwards, right? Steward gets the excess cash. They probably reinvest in some other buildings. Oh, if I press spacebar, I can bring up the agenda real quick. Okay, that was cool. I didn't know that. So, furthermore, and this, by the way, is going to continue. Like every property they buy kind of follows the same, MO. All the way up until now, we're talking about the $40 million yacht. So Ralph de la Torre, okay, this is the picture of the yacht. Through these types of deals where, a private equity fund buys a property and then quickly turns around and resells it to MPT, and Steward ends up keeping the difference. This is the kind of result that allegedly, it has. This is a picture of the $40 million yacht that de la Torre allegedly bought with one of the dividends that he's been extracting from these types of deals. And this is a picture of a hospital that's supposed to be in construction that was not. I don't know what the status of this hospital is now, but apparently it was supposed to be under construction for 6 months and nothing's been done. So again, I'm gonna link the articles down in the comments, not in the comments, in the description of the video. So please check those out. All right, PHP. So I just want to bring to light a little bit more about how business is done and what goes on sometimes in these buy leasebacks type of deals. Because the rent is so onerous, I'm going to go into the 10Q here. A lot of times the operators will give stock in their holdings, which is basically, could be worth zero, and there may or may not be any kind of buyer for this type of stock. But you can see, like, one of the entities, for example, that's almost $700 million worth of PHP holdings that was received in 2023, I believe. Yeah, because you can see they had none of that in 2022, and now they received $700 million worth of stock in lieu of rent. Okay, That's a big chunk of the total revenue, by the way. I believe they received those shares from Prospect, but it really doesn't matter who they received them from. $700 million. The total revenue of MPW is like 1.461. Okay, that's huge. That's like, almost 50% of the entire revenue. That's a head scratcher, you know what I mean? So, and it's registered, a lot of that is registered as income. Okay? Even though it's a stock without a buyer that has a questionable value. Apparently, supposedly, theoretically, allegedly, the value of these stocks is appraised by third party, individuals, but who knows who these individuals are, and the interests in these companies don't yield any dividends or anything like that, so they get no cash value unless they sell it, so they really need to find a buyer for all this garbage. Now, I call it garbage because it's an unknown quantity. Like, it could be very valuable stock, but I highly, highly doubt it. Especially the Steward one, we know it's garbage for sure. These loans are worthless. Almost $400 million of loans because they keep having to extend. It's kind of like MPT is the credit card of Steward, and Steward keeps borrowing money from MPT in order to pay, the interest of their credit card, but they can't even do that. So they borrow even more money, take out more credit instead, just to fund their daily operations, and they neglect paying their credit card. They don't even pay their credit card payments. That's how bad it is. Okay, so Steward basically is like beyond saving at this point. But again, I want to make it a point that I'm not saying that there's fraud. Okay, there may not be fraud. I just think it could be perceived as just really overconfident, Ralph de la Torre. They just bought a bunch of properties. He thought he found the secret in making money in life, right? And then he decided to do all these sell and lease back deals with MPW. He keeps buying hospitals, selling the actual hospital, and keeping the interest in the operations themselves. And that way he has money to go out and buy even more hospitals. And so he thinks he discovered, sliced bread. But now, the chickens are coming home to roost, and the operation is really not sustainable anymore, it seems like. And so that's the situation. It could be just an overconfident CEO that has, is just too greedy. It's just too much greed. It's possible. It's possible. And so that brings me to some other closing thoughts here. Actually, these closing thoughts are going to take a minute, but I just want to read this paragraph here. That kind of, this is another article from prospect.org, but it kind of exemplifies what we're dealing with here. MPT's single biggest tenant, representing about a quarter of its assets, is Steward Health, a struggling community hospital chain into which the REIT has plowed more than $5.5 billion in those buy leaseback deals since 2016. Steward's former owner, Cerberus Capital Management, had extracted at least $800 million from the hospital chain by the time it sold it in 2021 to Steward founder Ralph de la Torre, right? So he owns it. Along with some senior managers, de la Torre bought out the private equity firm's interest by taking out a $335 million loan from MPT, right? So they took a loan from MPT, from Medical Properties Trust, to buy out the rest of Steward Health. So basically, MPT is intertwined with Steward very, very hardly. Hardly. Is that a word? Very much. And shortly thereafter extracted their own 9-figure dividend, basically $100 million, from Steward. So 800 by Cerberus and another 100 million by de la Torre. So close to $1 billion been extracted from these hospitals, and now they've been straddled with rent that they can't not pay. I talked a little bit that in my previous video. If you're interested about my evaluation though of MPW, you can check those videos out. As a result of these leasebacks and loans, Steward Health owes more than 400 million in annual rent to MPT. You see what I mean? So like 400 million in annual rent, that's a lot of money. You're going to need a lot more than the hospital C has to generate that kind of cash just to pay rent, let alone pay everybody and all their expenses and overhead. Unlike some of MPT's tenants, Steward pays its rent on time. This is an older article. It doesn't pay its rent on time anymore, largely because MPT has kept a constant stream of construction loans. This is exactly what we're doing now. They don't even hide it under the guise of construction loans anymore. They're just extending like bridge loans and whatever just to save the the value of their investments or whatever their rationale is. Construction loans, promissory notes, joint venture investments like the Maltese one, and that's also in the 10Q, by the way. Watch this. It's right here. International joint venture. 230 million. You can kiss that goodbye. Right? So 4 Colombian hospitals and a bunch of lost money to an entity that you're never going to see any money out of. And other IOUs following the company. Not flowing into the to the company. But Steward has not kept up with other obligations. So they're still not keeping up with these obligations. In a single Texas county, Steward has been sued by a linens provider, so they don't even pay their bills to, the scrub makers, 2 staffing agencies, an HVAC contractor, a supplier of cadaver carriers, and a drug detoxification service for amounts totaling more than 13 million. I mean, that's chump change, but still it's $13 million they did not pay for some reason. The financial strain has taken a toll on Steward hospitals. Kearney Hospital in Massachusetts. Anyways, but this goes on. But you get the point. Like, they've been paying rent up until then because, MPW is their partner. But they've even stopped doing that as the last couple of quarters. And they're running out of construction loans to give them and just kind of like giving them bridge loans. They're so far down in the hole, MPT is, with Steward, that it's hard to dig the hole back out. And let's see what else I got here. Okay, so this is an article by the Wall Street Journal that tries to expose some kind of I remember this article didn't have too much validity, but Wall Street Journal has also picked up the ball a little bit and started writing against MPT. This over here is the latest and greatest. Basically, it is a allegation. Well, it's basically they're guilty of doing it. So Ralph De La Torre hired this dude, a cardiologist, and built an incentive structure for him to bring more, cardiology business into the Steward hospitals. And that's apparently against the rules. It's illegal to do that, to give incentive structure. And on top of that, the guy has been billing Medicare for all kinds of practices, anything that operates that cardiology room. He just bills it, even if they don't actually perform a surgery. So a bunch of like false billings, etc. And on top of that, that's not entirely new practice at Steward Health. There was, I think, at the Watsonville Hospital or one of the other hospitals, doesn't matter which one, they were billing like 16% of elderly people for a disease that afflicts starved children. It doesn't even exist. So they've been billing, Medicare for that disease to elderly people, like 16% of them. So a lot of like, shady kind of corrupt dealings there. There's a bit of a history. Again, it's in the articles. You'll find it if you read all of them. All right, what else do we got here? Okay, this guy we're not going to talk about. That's one of the guys involved in the Malta situation. This is the case study. Okay, so I was reading more articles about Ralph De La Torre, because I wanted to find out like what he's all about, and we're going to go into the character of Ralph De La Torre here. And I'm putting it up in question because Obviously I don't know. Like I said, there's multiple perspectives on each story. He could be a great guy. Apparently, he's a very persuasive person, and his dad describes him as somebody that you could drop in the middle of an island of cannibals and he'll become their king. So I wanted to read up a little bit, so I went into this deep dive to try to find as much information as I can. Interestingly enough, his residence is put down as the residence for a few of the companies shell companies he owns. And interestingly enough, if I go to Google search, look, it's blacked out. You can't see it. You can see all the residences around. Do you see this? It's a nice house across the street. There's probably another nice house next to him. You can see all the houses around, but you can see that his house is actually blocked out. Isn't that amazing? I wonder why. But just a little interesting tidbit. So this is interesting here too. So he had a residence near Boston, and look what this article says about it. After it went up for sale for $6 million, this is in 2013, by the way, September 17, 2013. So he was pretty rich back then, or at least he had a house that was very expensive. So $6 million was a lot of money back then. This is what it says about it. 7-bedroom West Newton Hill home up for sale. The house is well known in democratic circles. De La Torre hosted President Obama there. In 2010, guys, he hosted the president for a fundraiser that netted almost $1 million for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Neighbors gathered outside to witness the presidential visit, while Obama spoke to 75 supporters inside a vaulted ceiling room with a massive flagstone fireplace. Look at this interesting tidbit I found right afterwards. That same month, Attorney General Martha Coakley announced that she had reached an agreement. She's a public figure, so I don't mind saying her name. Reached an agreement with Cerberus, allowing it to buy the Catholic Caritas Christi healthcare system, which is basically the system that De La Torre owns. So he hosted this fundraiser, and in order to get this deal through, probably. It included provision that the company could not close or sell the hospital for 3 years, a condition that is set to expire in November. But anyways, so they bought this hospital, and that basically led the seeds. That's what gave him the money, I think, to start Steward Health, which is, again, funded with Cerberus, again, by Cerberus. So here is the guy that I'm putting in question here. Ralph De La Torre is a founding chairman, CEO of Health Care Systems. Previously, Dr. De La Torre was CEO of Caritas Christi Healthcare, that company that I just mentioned, where he led the transformation of 6 hospital system and developed the business model for Steward, which was subsequently invested in by Cerberus Capital Management. He was the founder and CEO of the Cardiovascular Institute at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and of Cardiovascular Management Associates, one of the nation's first totally integrated systems for treating cardiac patients. At the same time, De La Torre was chief of cardiac surgery at BIDMC and a Harvard Medical Faculty physician. He was widely recognized as one of the top cardiac surgeons in the nation. He has founded several healthcare-related businesses and has numerous issued on pending patents. A frequent commentator on national healthcare policy issues. De La Torre's commentary has been featured in Businessweek, Fortune, CNBC, The Wall Street Journal, and Fox Business. So this guy's been on TV many times, among others. He graduated from Duke University in 1988. By the way, if this guy is doing some fraudulent stuff, he has a lot of balls to go on TV, right? But who knows? Where he was a member of Phi Beta Kappa and Tau Beta Pi, so a frat boy. And from a joint program between Harvard Medical School and MIT, so guy's got a lot of connections. So this is the guy, Ralph de la Torre. There he is, some more pictures. Here's him talking on Bloomberg. He's on YouTube. Phoenix Suns talking with a reporter here. There's a lot of stuff about him. Like, apparently he's a well-known guy. But he's done a lot. He's involved in many different companies, a lot of structures. He's nonstop. He seems like an energy bunny. But here's my question. Here's why I think it's questionable. Look at the statement from him. All right, this is really important to me. This is what he said. We will make related to the hospitals that he purchased in South Florida, again with a big loan from MPT, the same way he's been purchasing the other hospitals. We will make money from operations day one on them. I'm not worried about that. I'm pretty much predict that we're not going to get a penny out of South Florida. Did you see that? I pretty much predict that we're not going to get a penny out of South Florida for a few years, because every penny the hospitals make, I'm going to reinvest. You see that? So basically he promises to reinvest every penny, or predicts. He doesn't promise, but predict. He pretty much predicts that they're not going to get a penny out of the South Florida hospitals because he's going to reinvest. And then look at this. This is Steward Hospital on Glassdoor. It's got a 2.6 star rating. And look at the ratings category. Right? 3.0, 2.8, 2.7, compensation of benefits, 2.5 career opportunities, 2.4 culture and values, 2.3 senior management. Senior management is rated the lowest out of every other category. And just reading some of these is just hilarious. I don't want to log in because I don't want to pay anything, and I don't want spam email. But you can see some of these pros and cons are just hilarious. Like, look at this one. Nice co-workers, good benefits, good liars. Cons. The company is broke. They don't pay their vendors, so patient care is not the best. Not willing to pay employees, so always short, blah, 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 blah. Look at this one. Pros, nothing. The business model is disgusting. You might get a raise at the expense of your coworker. Cons, management lies. So, I mean, this is what you're looking at. Never consistent work environment. So, I mean, yeah, there was one employee that was accused of sexual harassment, etc. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, look, lack of leadership. They micromanage. Leadership forgets where they started. Lots of negative reviews, guys. 2.6, 2.34 leadership. So, and that's over 1,000 reviews there on Glassdoor. So the employees who work there and are coming out and writing about the company kind of know what's up and what the company is like in there. It's a pretty poorly rated company. Like, I was looking at a different company before by the name of Ibix, which is now bankrupt, by the way, and is delisted from the markets. And they had very similar Glassdoor, ratings. I think it was like in the ones, even like a 1.9 or something like that. So the employees usually kind of get a feel of how the company's run and what it's all about. And it seems to me like Steward's been raped by De La Torre for his other ventures and aspirations. I just can't say whether that's just bad, it's just greed, or there's anything malicious going on in there. Or it could be just a perverted legal way to keep extracting money from businesses and ruining them. So I can't make that conclusion. That conclusion has to be yours. But I just felt it was important to do this much, due diligence in order to try to find out what's going on with my own investment, which is, like 50 grand worth, actually more like 40 grand worth or less now. after the recent 30% drop of MPW. And I wanted to share that information with you. So let me know if some of that helped. Let me know if I'm missing something, or if you know something about the story that I don't, and I'm missing a piece, or I got something wrong. Again, I encourage you to read all the links below. And I'm tired of making this video. This is a 50-minute video. It's like the longest video I've ever made. Okay, that's it. Enough. All right, enough MPW Steward Health stuff. Peace.